Welcome to Global Trends. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across John Miller's Iowa fields, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the distant hum of cicadas, a familiar symphony that usually brought him comfort. But today, as John stood at the edge of his land, the beauty of the scene was overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. In his weathered hands he held a crumpled invoice. Fertilizer prices had soared again, higher than he'd ever seen before. Each number on the page seemed to weigh heavier than the last, a stark reminder of how quickly things could change. The cost of potash, the nutrient his soil needed most, was now threatening his farm's survival. Without it, his crops would struggle, and the land he'd spent years nurturing could begin to fail him. He remembered past hardships, droughts that cracked the earth, floods that washed away months of work, market crashes that left him with empty silos and sleepless nights. Yet this crisis, driven by forces far beyond his control, felt different. It was relentless, creeping into every decision, every hope for the season ahead. At the local co-op, the usual camaraderie was replaced by anxious conversations. Every farmer faced the same impossible choice: pay the new price and gamble on a miracle harvest, or cut back and risk a poor yield that could haunt them for years. John weighed his options, knowing that cutting back on fertilizer could mean stunted crops and a harvest that wouldn't cover his costs. But spending more than he could afford was a risk that threatened everything he'd built. Potash was essential for healthy crops, and skimping on it could damage the land for years, depleting the soil and making future seasons even more uncertain. The decision wasn't just about this year, it was about the legacy he hoped to leave behind. As the sun dipped below the horizon, John folded the invoice and walked slowly toward his farmhouse. The weight of his mortgage, his family's needs, and the uncertain future pressed down on his shoulders, heavier than any load he'd ever carried. Inside, his family gathered around the kitchen table, bills spread out like a map of their worries. The rising cost of this single, crucial ingredient was more than a budget line. It was a direct threat to their way of life, to the dreams they'd built together. Outside, the quiet fields seemed to echo with a pressing question. How much more could farmers like John bear, and what would be left if the burden became too great? To most, potash is just a word, but to farmers, it's as vital as rain. Potash refers to potassium-rich minerals, one of the three essential nutrients, N, P, and K, needed for crops to thrive. Potassium strengthens plants, helps them resist drought and disease, and boosts yields. Unlike nitrogen, which can be synthesized, potash comes from ancient underground deposits, found in only a few places worldwide. Mining and processing potash is complex and expensive, making supply limited. Every harvest depletes potassium from the soil, so it must be replaced to keep fields productive. For American agriculture, a steady, affordable potash supply is non-negotiable. Without it, the nation's food security is at risk. America grows the world's food, but when it comes to potash, it's almost entirely dependent on imports. Over 90% of U.S. potash is imported, and 80% of that comes from Canada's vast Saskatchewan mines. Domestic production is small and lower quality, nowhere near enough to meet demand. The U.S. has no strategic potash reserve, so the entire system relies on a constant flow from Canada. Other sources, Russia, Belarus, Israel, are either risky or insufficient. For decades, this cross-border trade has been stable and mutually beneficial, but this reliance is a structural vulnerability. If Canadian supply falters, American agriculture is exposed. Canada isn't just the best option, it's the only practical one for U.S. farmers. In 2025, new tariffs from the Trump administration shattered the stable potash trade, sending shockwaves through the agricultural sector. For decades, American farmers had relied on a predictable supply of Canadian potash, a crucial fertilizer ingredient to keep their crops healthy and yields high. Suddenly, that certainty was gone. A 10% tariff on Canadian potash instantly raised costs for American farmers, as suppliers passed the increase down the line. Fertilizer prices spiked almost overnight, leaving farmers scrambling to adjust their budgets and operations. Many had already purchased seed and equipment, but now faced unexpected expenses that threatened their bottom line. Even after a reduction from an initial 25%, the impact was severe. Farm budgets were thrown into chaos. Some farmers delayed planting, while others cut back on fertilizer use, risking lower yields. The uncertainty rippled through rural communities, affecting not just growers but local businesses and suppliers as well. Legal battles and policy shifts created uncertainty, making it nearly impossible for farmers to plan or secure financing. Bankers hesitated to extend credit, unsure how long the tariffs would last or what new rules might emerge. For many, the future felt more unpredictable than ever before. The tariffs were part of a broader trade war, with new duties on dozens of goods and the end of duty-free imports under $800. This sweeping policy shift affected everything from farm equipment to household goods, driving up prices and fueling tensions between trading partners. For farmers, the potash tariff wasn't just policy, it was a direct tax on their ability to grow food. Every dollar spent on higher fertilizer costs meant less money for family needs, equipment repairs, or investing in next year's crop. The stress weighed heavily on farm families across the country. The timing couldn't have been worse, hitting just as farmers needed stability most. With global markets already volatile and weather patterns unpredictable, the added burden of tariffs pushed many to the brink. The result: higher costs, more risk, and growing frustration in rural America. As communities struggled to adapt, the true cost of these new policies became clear. Uncertainty, hardship, and a deepening sense of unease about the future of American farming. The potash tariff's first victim is the farmer, squeezed by rising costs and global market prices they can't control. Many must gamble, pay more for fertilizer and hope for high crop prices, or cut back and risk lower yields. Higher input costs make U.S. crops less competitive globally, threatening exports and rural economies. The pain doesn't stop at the farm. Costs ripple through the food chain, raising prices for processors, grocers, and ultimately, families at the grocery store. A single tariff on fertilizer could mean higher bills for every American. Farmers feel trapped, forced to shoulder the burden of a trade war they didn't start. The uncertainty erodes confidence, making it hard to invest or plan for the future. The economic and psychological toll is mounting across the heartland. Canada, facing tariffs on its key export, is signaling it won't take the hit quietly. Officials have floated the idea of restricting or even cutting off potash exports to the U.S., a dramatic escalation. The threat alone sends shockwaves through American agriculture, highlighting just how dependent the U.S. is. If Canada acted, fertilizer prices would skyrocket, and many farmers simply couldn't get the potash they need. The stable trade relationship has become a geopolitical battleground, with potash as the weapon. Canada's warning is clear. Trade isn't just about economics, it's about power. The U.S. is learning how vulnerable its food system is to a single foreign supplier. The future of American farming now hangs on the outcome of this standoff. This isn't the first time potash has been a strategic flashpoint. Historically, potash has played a crucial role in agriculture and industry, making it a valuable resource during times of conflict and peace alike. During World War I, Germany's potash embargo sent prices soaring and threatened Allied food supplies. The scarcity of this essential mineral fertilizer had a direct impact on food production, highlighting its importance in sustaining nations during wartime. Today, the U.S. faces a similar vulnerability, this time with a friendly neighbor, but the risk is real. The interdependence between the U.S. and Canada for potash supplies underscores the delicate balance of international trade relations. The tariffs have turned a stable partnership into a source of conflict, reminding both sides of their leverage. Political maneuvers and economic policies have far-reaching consequences, affecting not just the two countries involved, but the global market as well. Farm groups are pushing for a diplomatic solution, an exemption for Canadian potash or a reversal of the tariffs. They argue that cooperation and mutual benefit should take precedence over short-term political gains. Without resolution, farmers will face higher costs, and consumers will pay more at the store. The ripple effect of increased production costs will be felt across the entire supply chain, from the fields to the grocery aisles. If Canada restricts exports, the crisis could deepen, with shortages and skyrocketing prices. The potential for empty shelves and food insecurity becomes a stark reality, emphasizing the need for swift and effective action. America may scramble to boost domestic production, but it won't be enough. The infrastructure and resources required to meet the demand cannot be developed overnight, leaving the country in a precarious position. For now, the future of U.S. agriculture hangs in the balance, waiting for leaders to act. The decisions made today will shape the agricultural landscape for years to come, determining the stability and sustainability of food supplies for future generations.